He thought he was just helping a student in need. A small favor, a roof over her head, and a bit of extra income to make ends meet. For Tom, a single dad raising his 9-year-old son, life had already thrown enough curveballs. After his divorce, it was just the two of them in their modest house on the quiet side of town. Bills, homework, and the endless exhaustion of parenting alone. Tom had learned to handle it all. Or at least, he thought he had. The ad had been simple. Room for rent. Quiet neighborhood. Safe for students. She had replied within hours. Emily. At least that was the name she gave him. Polite, shy, with a voice that seemed almost too gentle over the phone. She said she was studying at the local university, looking for a temporary place until she sorted out her own apartment. She seemed normal enough. Tom liked normal. He needed normal. The first time he saw her, Emily looked even smaller than he expected. Petite, with her hair tucked behind her ears and a nervous smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She carried a single backpack and a tiny suitcase, as if she owned nothing but the clothes on her back. "Thanks for letting me stay here," she said, her voice soft. "I really appreciate it." Tom smiled back, offered her the spare key, and told her the rules. No parties, no guests after 10, and keep things tidy. She nodded, and for a moment, he felt like he had done something good, something that mattered. But almost immediately, small things started to feel off. The way she always seemed to know more about the house than she should. How she would linger in rooms a little too long, or peek into corners as if she were searching for something. At first, Tom brushed it off as imagination, stress from work, or the natural paranoia that comes with living alone with a child. Still, there was a flicker of unease he couldn't shake, the tiniest whisper in the back of his mind telling him that maybe Emily wasn't exactly who she claimed to be. And then there was the night his son came to him, frightened, whispering about strange noises coming from the room she'd just moved into. Tom told himself it was nothing. Creaky floors, shadows, a child's imagination running wild. But deep down, he couldn't ignore it. Something about Emily didn't sit right, and the feeling gnawed at him every day, growing stronger, like a storm brewing just beyond the horizon. He tried to tell himself he was overreacting. Maybe she was just a quiet, awkward student trying to adjust to a new city. Maybe it was nothing. But when he found a small, locked box tucked in the corner of her room, something she hadn't mentioned, his heart skipped a beat. What could a quiet, polite student possibly be hiding? Tom had no idea that opening that box would be the first step into a secret far darker and stranger than anything he could have imagined. A secret that would pull him, his son, and Emily into a web of lies, deception, and danger. One that would make him question everything he thought he knew about the people he trusted. And the moment he touched that box, everything changed. Tom had always been careful. He wasn't careless about who he let into his home, but life had a way of forcing compromises. After the divorce, money was tighter than ever, and his son, Jamie, was growing faster than he could keep up with. Between late-night work shifts and school projects, Tom's life was a constant balancing act. He liked order, predictability. That's why the idea of renting out the spare room seemed perfect. Help him with bills, give someone a safe place to stay, and keep their little household running smoothly. Jamie, his 9-year-old, was a curious, bright kid with a streak of imagination that kept Tom both entertained and exhausted. He loved to draw, build things, and ask questions that seemed far older than his age. But since the divorce, he had grown quieter, more observant. Tom noticed things Jamie saw that he sometimes overlooked: the flicker of a shadow, the sound of footsteps at odd hours. He chalked it up to a child's heightened awareness, a survival instinct in the quiet house that used to feel so lively. Emily fit into their lives almost too easily. She helped Jamie with his homework without being asked, kept her room tidy, and seemed grateful for everything. At first, Tom felt a sense of relief. Finally, a young person who respected the house and didn't bring chaos. She even brought groceries occasionally and offered to help with small chores, which made Tom wonder if he had underestimated her. But the oddities kept creeping in, subtle enough that he could convince himself they weren't real. She would leave the lights on in rooms she never used, quietly rearrange things on the counter, or ask questions about Jamie that seemed unnecessary. Nothing alarming enough to confront, nothing concrete. Just tiny little things that tugged at the edge of his mind, whispering that something was off. Tom also noticed the way Emily interacted with others. On the surface, She was polite, reserved, easy to like. But there was a sharpness in her gaze that hinted at calculation, a precision in her movements that didn't match the clumsy charm she projected. Once, when he caught her watching him from the hallway, she smiled as if caught, but it didn't reach her eyes. That smile lingered in his memory, unsettling in its intensity. He wanted to believe she was just shy, just adjusting to a new place, but something about her background felt incomplete. She was vague about her studies, evasive when he asked where her family lived. He tried not to push. It wasn't polite to pry, but the questions nagged at him. And Jamie, usually cheerful and trusting, had started looking at her differently, a hint of unease in his wide, innocent eyes. The house, once predictable and safe, began to feel different. Shadows seemed longer, rooms colder, even during the day. Tom's gut told him to be careful, yet he couldn't pinpoint why. He had this sinking feeling, the kind that warns you something is coming, though you don't yet know what it is. And the more he tried to ignore it, the louder it grew, until it was impossible to pretend everything was fine. He didn't know it yet, but Emily's presence was only the beginning. Behind her quiet manners and polite smiles lay a truth that would shake the very foundation of his life. And one night, when Jamie whispered about noises from her room again, Tom realized that normal had already slipped away, and he might be too late to stop what was coming. It started small. Missing items, Jamie's favorite toy, a notebook Tom kept on his desk, a set of old letters from his late mother. Nothing expensive, nothing that could be traced back to Emily. Just enough to unsettle him. He tried to brush it off, telling himself that maybe he misplaced things, that Jamie was forgetful, or that he was imagining patterns where none existed. But deep down, he knew the unease wasn't his imagination. Emily's behavior grew stranger too. She would disappear for hours in her room, leaving the door slightly ajar, as if daring him to look. Once, Tom noticed a flicker of movement in the window reflection late at night, her silhouette pacing, muttering something under her breath. When he knocked, she answered instantly, smiling that same calm, polite smile. "Just studying," she said. But there was a tension in the air, an energy that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Jamie started acting differently as well. He asked questions Tom didn't have answers for. "Why does Emily always go into the attic?" he whispered one afternoon, clutching his sketchbook tightly. Tom froze. The attic was locked. They rarely used it, but Emily had the key. "I don't know, buddy," he said, trying to sound casual, his throat tight. "Maybe she's just organizing her stuff." But even as he spoke, a part of him didn't believe it. It wasn't just the small things anymore. Tom noticed subtle changes in the atmosphere of the house. Doors creaked open on their own. Strange smells would waft from Emily's room, faint at first, then unmistakable. Papers shifted on counters. Objects seemed rearranged after he swore he had left them untouched. Every day, he felt the walls closing in, the safe little world he had built for Jamie starting to crumble. He wanted to confront her, but didn't know how, or if he should. There was no proof, only instincts and small, disturbing signs. And yet, the feeling gnawed at him constantly, making him second-guess everything. Was he overreacting? Or was Emily really hiding something dangerous? Then one evening, he overheard her speaking on the phone. Her words were clipped, urgent, almost unnatural. "Everything's ready. No one suspects a thing. He'll never know." Tom's heart skipped a beat. He froze in the hallway, straining to hear, but she hung up before he could catch more. The words echoed in his mind like a warning bell, sharp and chilling. Tom knew in that moment. Emily wasn't who she pretended to be. But what exactly was she hiding? And how far would it go before it reached them? From that night on, Tom couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind outside felt like a warning. He found himself watching Emily more closely, pretending to be busy with work while silently noting every move she made. And she noticed. He could see it in the way her eyes sometimes lingered on him, sharp, calculating, almost amused, as if she knew he was onto her, and yet wanted him to wonder how much she really knew. Jamie, too, was restless. He began waking up in the middle of the night, mumbling about shadows moving in Emily's room, about the sound of soft scraping or scratching coming from behind closed doors. Tom tried to reassure him, held him close, whispered that it was just the house settling. But even as he spoke, he felt the same unease prickling at the edge of his mind, a truth he couldn't name. The locked box in Emily's room had become an obsession. Tom didn't touch it, not yet. He couldn't. But he found himself lingering outside her door, listening, watching for the slightest hint of what it might contain. And sometimes, when he thought no one was looking, he swore he saw her fingers brushing the surface, tracing invisible patterns, as if drawing strength from something hidden inside. Days blurred into nights, tension coiling tighter with each passing hour. Packages began arriving at the house, addressed to Emily, but left in odd corners. She'd hide them quickly when Tom approached, muttering something about books or study materials. But the packages weren't books. There was an unnatural weight to them, a coldness he couldn't explain. And sometimes, late at night, he caught faint glimpses of her opening them, her movements frantic but precise, like someone performing a ritual only they understood. Tom wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but fear kept him frozen. There was something in her presence that made his chest tighten, that made him hesitate, unsure if he could handle the truth. He began carrying a small flashlight everywhere in the house, a habit that made him feel slightly safer, though he knew safety was slipping further away with every passing day. One night, he returned from a late shift to find Jamie standing silently in the living room, pale and wide-eyed. "Dad, she's in the attic," Jamie whispered. "I saw her. She was doing something." Tom's heart hammered against his ribs. The attic, the locked, dusty attic where he'd stored old boxes and forgotten furniture, was supposed to be off-limits. He gripped the doorknob, his fingers trembling. He debated calling the police. He debated confronting her head-on. But something in his gut told him he needed to see it with his own eyes first. Slowly, almost painfully, he turned the key in the lock, listening to Jamie's shallow breaths behind him. The air was thick, almost suffocating. He could hear faint shuffling inside, the sound of movement, a whisper of something being shifted or arranged. Tom's hand hovered over the door, heart pounding, mind racing. Every instinct screamed at him to stop, to run, to call for help. But the compulsion to know the truth was stronger. And as he pushed the door open, Tom froze as his eyes adjusted to the dim light of the attic. Emily wasn't just rifling through old boxes. She was carefully arranging them, her movements deliberate, almost ritualistic. And then he saw it, the box from her room, open now, revealing its contents. It wasn't money or documents or even valuables. Inside were dozens of photographs, pictures of other landlords, other families, even strangers, each one meticulously labeled, dated, and annotated in her precise handwriting. Before he could process it, a low, cold voice cut through the air. "You weren't supposed to see this yet." Emily stepped into the light, her calm, polite smile gone. The warmth he had once trusted in her vanished entirely, replaced by something calculating, dangerous. Tom's stomach dropped. He realized the horrifying truth. She wasn't just a con artist or a thief. She had been planning something far more sinister, something premeditated and personal. And worst of all, Jamie was still upstairs, completely unaware, vulnerable to whatever Emily had intended all along. Tom knew in that instant that everything he thought he understood about Emily, and about the safety of his own home, was a lie. And that lie had the power to destroy them both, if he didn't act fast. Tom's pulse raced as he stepped fully into the attic. The shadows seemed to stretch toward him, the air heavy with a tension that made his chest ache. Emily turned slowly, her eyes glinting with something cold and sharp. "You shouldn't have come up here," she said, her voice low, almost playful. Now everything changes. Tom's mind raced. Jamie was still upstairs. He had to act fast. He forced himself to stay calm, to think clearly. "Emily, it's over. Whatever this is, you can't do it," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, even as his hands shook. Her laugh was soft but chilling. "Over? Oh, Tom, you have no idea." She lunged for the box of photos, but Tom moved faster, slamming the lid shut and stepping between her and the staircase. She froze, then smiled, tilting her head like a predator weighing her options. Suddenly, the attic floor creaked beneath her foot, too weak to support her weight. Emily's eyes widened as the boards gave way just enough for her to stumble. Tom seized the moment, grabbing her arm and yanking her back to solid ground. The struggle was tense, close, and exhausting, every second threatening disaster. Finally, with a desperate shove, he forced her toward the door. She stopped, panting, her face a mask of fury and amusement. "This isn't the end, Tom," she hissed. "I always get what I want eventually." Tom didn't wait to argue. He grabbed Jamie, who had been peeking nervously from the hallway, and bolted downstairs. The box stayed behind, locked, a tangible reminder of the danger they had narrowly escaped. Once safe, Tom called the authorities, and Emily vanished before they could arrive. The photos, the packages, her intentions, all of it remained a mystery. But for now, he had Jamie, and that was all that mattered. And just when Tom thought they were finally safe, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number lit up the screen. "You only think it's over. I've already found your other son." The house was quiet now. The chaos of the past few days felt like a distant storm, leaving only the ache of exhaustion and relief behind. Tom sat at the kitchen table, Jamie curled up beside him, holding his favorite stuffed bear as if it could shield him from the world. The police had searched the attic, taken the box of photographs, and assured him that Emily was being tracked. But the unease lingered, the memory of her cold, calculating gaze etched into his mind. Tom tried to explain to Jamie as gently as he could. Some people, they're not always who they seem. Sometimes, they pretend to be good, but they're not. But we're safe now, okay? Jamie nodded, though his eyes were wide and thoughtful, as if he were weighing the meaning of every word. In the days that followed, Tom took extra precautions. He changed locks, installed security cameras, and tightened the small routine of their lives. The house felt different, less like a home, more like a fortress. Yet amid the fear, there was also a sense of gratitude. They had made it through something terrifying, and that survival had strengthened the bond between father and son in a way nothing else could. Tom also realized something important about trust. He had almost dismissed his instincts, almost brushed off the warning signs because he wanted to believe in normalcy. But sometimes, he learned, instincts were more reliable than appearances, and courage didn't always come from fighting. It came from paying attention, from listening, from protecting the people who mattered most. Jamie returned to his cheerful, curious self, though he asked fewer questions about strangers now and seemed to watch the world with a new sense of caution. Tom made a promise to himself that he would teach his son not just about homework and chores, but about awareness, resilience, and intuition. The invisible shields that could protect him when life turned unexpectedly dark. And yet, in the quiet moments, Tom couldn't ignore the nagging thought that Emily hadn't entirely disappeared. The unknown number, the chilling text, someone like her didn't vanish without leaving a trace. But he refused to let fear rule them. He refused to let her shadow define their days. Instead, he focused on what he could control, Jamie's laughter as he built a new fort in the living room, the smell of dinner cooking, the small, ordinary joys that made life worth living. That was their victory, not a dramatic rescue, not a confrontation with evil, but the quiet reclaiming of safety, love, and normalcy. Tom knew one thing for certain. Life would throw more unexpected challenges, more people who weren't what they seemed. But he and Jamie had survived, and that bond, forged in fear and courage, was stronger than any shadow that could come their way. As night fell, Tom tucked Jamie into bed and whispered, "No matter what, I've got you. Always." Jamie smiled sleepily, trusting completely, and for the first time in days, the house felt warm again. Outside, the wind stirred, rustling the trees. And somewhere, far away, Emily's presence lingered, a reminder that shadows exist, but light is always worth protecting.